All yours, Jacqueline.
Good evening, everyone. For purposes of having this webinar available to you after the event, it is being recorded. Welcome to the third webinar hosted by the Forum Group of the Good Practice Movement. This webinar is entitled Addressing Risks. Next slide, please, Betty. At this moment, we would like to honor Haydeen Charles John. In November 2023, when we were hosting our results chain webinar, Haydeen had expressed an interest in joining the Good Practice Movement Forum group. Unfortunately, she passed away on February 9th. To honor her memory, we are going to take a moment of silence starting now. Thank you all very much for your understanding. Next slide, please. A little bit about the Good Practice Movement, which I think we can safely say was the brainchild of Betty Comby. And the Good Practice Movement was set up to support a culture of continuous improvement, to exchange knowledge and experience, and as part of exchanging knowledge and experience, sharing tools and techniques, of course, recognizing good practice. And all of this is towards our sustainable development. Next slide, please. The members of the Forum Group of the Good Practice Movement are Binta Ernest, myself, Jacqueline Rosario Simeon, Randy Monchut, Pearl Ann Cinder, who is our presenter tonight for RISK, Samantha Ernest, Betty Comby, who you can call the core of this group, and Jessica Edward. Just some housekeeping for tonight. The host would have muted your microphones. It will be unmuted during the question and answer session. This is just so we have a clear and continuous flow. If you have questions as we're going along, please put it in the chat and put a capital Q in front of that question so we would know that you're asking a question. Once we've opened the microphones, a little bit later you can chat, but for the purposes of flow, we will ask you to put questions throughout the webinar and the host will be watching that. During the question and answer segment, please remember to use the raise your hand icon so that we can respect everybody's time and input. And we ask that you all be very respectful to each other and make this a very productive evening. Again, welcome aboard. And now I'll hand you over to Pearl Alcindor, our facilitator for tonight. Pearl, over to you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Good evening once again, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. Today we'll be looking at risk. Specifically, the topics we'll be touching on is we want to have an understanding of what exactly are risk. We want to have a practical approach to the topic today. So we will engage in having what are the risk consideration that we take into our homes. And based on that, from that framework, we will be looking at how we address and manage risk. So that is part of the movement's thrust towards best practices and incorporating best practices in our everyday lives, more or less. Then we will have a question and answer session. So if you have some clarity you need on the concepts, or you want to make some contribution to the topic, we have a segment for that. There will be a call to join the forum, the forum group, You'll be getting some additional information about the forum group to incentivize and to stimulate your interest. And then we will end with a feedback session. So let us get into it. So we are going to start with addressing risk. And when we think about risk, we look at risk as something unexpected that could happen to probably have impact on our plans and things that we would want to accomplish. So inherently, when we look at risk, it is embedded in uncertainty. And uncertainty is purely because sometimes we do not have complete information about the actions or decisions that we want to make. So take, for instance, you are leaving home to have you plan a picnic, you're leaving home to have a picnic, and you see that the weather is kind of hazy, so you're not too sure whether it's going to rain or not. Okay, so there's some uncertainty. You don't know what the outcome is going to be. So this is where risk comes, because we do not know in the future what is going to happen. We do not have absolute information. So when we look at risk could be negative in that you can have a negative consequence. It could be a loss or something harmful that could happen in terms of not letting you achieve your goals, objectives, or to execute your plans as you intended. And so traditionally, when we looked at risk, you look at the risk as an absolute loss. So look at it, for instance, that there is a fire and the house burned completely. So that would be your traditional view of risk, where it suggests absolute loss. But in terms of best practice, there is a positive component to risk, where it looks at opportunity, good things that could happen to advance your goals and objectives. Okay, so this in a nutshell is risk. So we're looking at a risk as within uncertainty, because we do not have absolute information, and we're looking at the implication on the outcome on our plans and our goals. So from that perspective, let's start having a conversation on potential risk or hazards from our home. So we will now open to the members of the team to give some examples of consideration of risk inside the house. Perhaps, Betty, we can start with you.
Well, you know, Pearl, the example I like, and I don't know if it's like home or just like the outside of the home, is the example of a threat with regard to pregnancy, diseases, and so on. So I like the condom, the condom. I like the condom as a strategy. And what I find when you look at the condom as a strategy, so when you meet somebody and the person says, well, I'm not doing anything with you unless you protected, there I have my condom. So I'm handling that risk of an opportunity. But then I meet somebody and I don't know where they have been, you know, what they have been up to. And then again, I say, boy, I have a condom because I'm handling a threat. So that's my personal example, Pearl.
Okay, thank you for that, Betsy. It is a very practical example. Any member wants to share another risk hazard at home? So for risk hazard at home, we can look at things that we do perhaps as ladies. So Marina, you can put your comment. If you have a comment, you can put it in the chat and we will address it. But we will take questions later on, right?
And I think Pearl, we have some other examples as far as at home. At home is the ironing the day before and not the morning, just in case there's no electricity. At home, there is having the water tanks, just in case you run out of water. So we have a number of at-home examples that I think other people can share. So could we hear from more people as far as at-home examples and what's in the chat, Randy?
Yeah, so Marina just said a flood. So that's one of
What about a flood? How would you address that? Some examples of risk consideration. So how do you address the flood, Marina? So it is a risk that you can have flooding, but how do you address that? So out of risk consideration, so that you're considering that risk. Any other examples, guys? Jacqueline, any example coming from you?
Well, I'm thinking of a risk that I didn't really mitigate that I had recently. I got home tired and thought I'd make an egg salad. So I put the eggs boilers into my room. Needless to say, the next thing I thought was that my house was burning because I could do the smell stuff burning. So I didn't mitigate that risk very well at all. But yes, to me, there's always the risk in the kitchen when you're cooking. There's always a risk for me, at least for me.
Yes, another.
If you're tired and it's not planned well and you don't make sure you sit around the kitchen as a mitigation exercise, then you put, well, of course, I remained hungry that night because I wasn't going to do anything else after that. But yes, I find for me around the house is that. Then the other one that I actually had recently, Marina reminded me of, was putting on the washing machine and not for some reason the water disposal hose was not in the channel that it should be, and my laundry room was flooded.
There you go. And Marina spoke about drains as well.
Yeah.
Marina said to
it was that. We take it for granted that the hose is always in the right place and never check it after you've set up the washer. We just never go back to it. I have never thought once that I needed to check all of these things. You check the oil in the car and all of that. You don't always check things like your washing machine, water disposal. So that was one I didn't look at and actually had a flood in the house.
Yeah, and then Paul also spoke of the rain and carrying an umbrella. The whole idea of a spare tire. All these are ways, a strategy you have in place in anticipation of a risk. In the kitchen as well, something I do is the handles of the pan, I ensure that it is pointing to the back of the stove and not to the front of the stove, so somebody passing by doesn't hit. Yes, so this we have a lot of examples that we have. Surya is saying something. Randy, any more persons from the chat? Yes.
Yeah, so Chantal St. Rose said not having an extra tank of cooking gas. Right.
Beautiful, yes.
And Serena Boyle said having exposed wiring.
Yeah, that's dangerous. Yes, definitely. And so you ensure that's covered. Very good. So you are identifying risk as home as well as you have strategies in place to address it. Yeah, great. I think there were some good examples, Phil. What do you think?
Yes, this is some very good examples, some practical and relatable examples, because in our everyday lives, we would not be thinking in terms of these are a risk that we need to be aware of, or even we are innately aware of them and we take action, but we probably do not relate it to risk and managing risk. So these really bring home the point, Betty. So thank you for the intervention and contribution. So we will continue and look at, so in terms of the practice of managing risk, there is a framework to addressing and managing risk. And in the framework is first to identify risk. And identifying the risk, you look at the circumstances that you are in, because each circumstance would have different type of risk. So we were looking at home, and in home, you'd see that there are certain risks that's specific to the house. If you are at work, or probably if you are in a public place, there are different risks that you would ways to identify risk, and different risks that would be relevant to that situation. So we identify the risk, what it is that we are up against, and then we're going to now go through assessing the risk. So we know which is our biggest threat, which is the one that we need to address, or which one is that we need to pay better attention to. And then when we have done that assessment, then we're going to figure out what is our best way to respond. So in the home example, we were saying, okay, for flood, we will put a drain. Betty indicated when she's cooking, to prevent accident, she'll turn the handle the pot away to the back of facing the back of the stove. You anticipate rain, you're going to carry an umbrella. So after you assess your risk, then you're going to say, what are your strategies you're going to put in to respond? And it does not just stop here. Then we go on to say, how do we monitor and control risk? So we understand the strategies and action that we have taken actually is addressing the risk, and there are not new risk approaching. So in managing risk, addressing and managing risk, it requires us to be very vigilant and proactive. Anything you want to add, Betty?
I think that word proactive, Pearl, and for any of us who are familiar with Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the very first habit of highly effective people is to be proactive. And addressing and managing risk is about being proactive. I think that's an important point to be made there.
Yes, yes. Okay, so thank you for re-emphasizing that point, Betty. So in identifying the risk, we have a simple framework, and I think it's a framework that probably all of us would be familiar with, and it is to use a SWOT analysis. And for SWOT analysis, it is looking at your strength, what it is that you do well, very well, your risk, what it is that you can do to improve, your opportunities, what is there that could assist, your threat, what is there to harm. So it is a tool that gives us a frame, a way, a method to identifying our risk. So in identifying our risk, we look at what is internal. So in our home example, we're going to look at strengths. What are positive things in our home that is going to help us protect, that will help protect and minimize us from risk? So that's internal. External, we're going to see what happened in the broader environment that is going to help us improve our safety, the safety and security of our home. So this is the positive things. In terms of negative, we're looking at weaknesses. What are the vulnerabilities that exist in our home that we need to address to improve to strengthen our risk responses? And then what are the threats that exist? So for instance, in terms of the strength, if we continue with the home example, we could say, well, we live in a fairly safe neighborhood, right? So that's a strength. An opportunity that would exist is we see in terms of broader technology. So now you can have security features on your house with AI that could detect human and pets and so on. Or you can look at, if you live in a community, the community is well knit, you can do a group insurance for your home. So that's an opportunity. Weaknesses are, what are the vulnerabilities? Perhaps your door is not as strong as it should be, or you're seeing that there's some weaknesses in your lock system. To address that, a threat could be there's an increase in robbery and a certain type of crime in the neighborhood. So this is in terms of how we can use that framework, that tool to help us identify our risk, positive and negative risk. Anything you need to add, Betty?
Well, I love a SWOT analysis. I cannot stress that enough because it looks at both the internal and external. And actually, in my book, I talk about an example with my son where we use a SWOT analysis. And in using the SWOT analysis, he had his vision of what he wanted in the next 10 years. And so when we looked at threats, things that could prevent him from achieving that vision, one of the things we looked at was unplanned pregnancy. And it was amazing. I never thought that I could actually have a sex education talk with my son while discussing his vision. But we looked at unplanned pregnancy. And so in looking at unplanned pregnancy, we then had to go on and look at, well, what are the strategies you have to put in place to address unplanned pregnancy? So the value of a SWOT analysis, and it works for anything, any objective, any idea, anything you're trying to achieve, it is a good starting point to use a SWOT analysis. That's it for me, Pearl.
Thank you, Betty.
Good point, Betty.
Yes.
I also use it with my girls, but I use it in self-awareness exercises, not even getting to goals. That's it. Because particularly because of the external, internal component. Because there's strengths and weaknesses. Remember, we often don't like to look inside of ourselves. And if you use this, it really gives you an opportunity to identify your strengths and weaknesses. And then the opportunities are those people, agencies, resources that are available to you that you can use to kind of like reduce, kind of address your weaknesses and build some strength around there. And the threats are, again, what are those external agencies and forces, the things in your environment that could actually be a threat to you succeeding or you growing as a person. So, like you said, Betty, I really think this is a tool that can be used any place at all, and it's really wonderful for a self-reflection exercise.
Yes, you're very right, Jacqueline. That thing about self-reflection, which is essential if we're talking emotional intelligence, that you need to be know thyself. And so doing a SWOT analysis is a good way to get to know yourself as far as internally, your strengths and your weaknesses. Yes, ideal for self-reflection.
Okay. Okay. So this is good. So we can see that it is a tool that is multifaceted and it has multiple use. But essentially it is an assessment. It allows you to do an assessment, your internal assessment, external assessment, and to determine what are the course of action, whether in terms of your personal development, whether it's to be looking at the factors that affect you in terms of your career, your relationships, and so on. So it is a tool that is applicable in many environments and situations. So first, let's look at now assessing the risk. So we started, we looked at risks that affect our house. So when we assessing the risk, we look at what is the likelihood that this is going to happen, okay? And what is the impact if it happens. So we spoke about flooding. So you're in an area and then the slope is not very stable, and then there is excessive flooding in water and so on. So there is the possibility, the impact, it could affect your house, erode your house at the foundation of your house. The great impact. For rain, there's the probability in the rainy season, like great high likelihood that you will have rain. The impact is you're going to be late for work or whatever event that is going to happen. Okay, so when we're looking at the assessing, we are going to be looking and say these things that we have identified, how likely are they to happen? And if they do happen, what is the consequence? What is the impact? So we have a small diagram to bring home the point of the probability of something happening and its impact. So this is a stick man walking on the street. So you see that there is a hole more or less in the street. And we say if he walk through, there's a high probability that he'll go through the sink, the dip in the street, but there's very low impact because reasonably you can walk through there. Okay. Then we look at the second scenario. You see the gap is very small, so that you can, as you see, the man could just walk over. Very low probability that he will fall into the hole. Very low impact. Okay. Same way now the scenario changes. You're walking down the street. You see the hole in the road is deeper and there are sharp objects in there. So although he can leap through, he has enough length in his leg to leap through to the other side. So there's a low probability that he's going to fall in. But if it does fall in, you see, because of the sharp object, there's a high impact. With high impact with bodily harm that could happen to him. Okay? And if we look at the final scenario, we see that the gap is even wider, so that there's a high probability that he will not be able to get to the other side. And then now the risk, look at the hole in the road is much deeper. Not only that, it's much deeper, there is sharp objects in it. So you see the probability of crossing, there's a high probability that he will not be able to cross. And if he falls in, there's a high impact of bodily harm. So just to bring, to give to you some perspective in terms of looking at risk in terms of probability and the impact of it, okay? Now, I believe there is an article that is written about this whole diagram, but our focus now is to just help you understand when you're looking at risk, bring into perspective well, the probability and impact, okay? Anything you want to add, Betty?
Yes, but just to say that another term that we use in terms of probabilities, what is the chance of it happening? And another term that we use for impact is, sometimes we say, what's the consequence? So they're different terminologies, but meaning probability and impact.
Yes. Okay. And then when you're looking at the chance you can use a simple example. So for instance, if a friend of yours is picking you up for work, right? And every day, 5 days of the week, they're picking you up. And you see 3 days they are late, 2 days they are on time. So you could see the probability that they'll be late about 75% based on pattern, okay? So these are simple ways you can be able to gauge probability or the likelihood of something happening. All right, so then we have identified our risk using the SWOT framework. We have assessed to see the probability and impact. Then now we're going to see what are the strategies, what are the options, what are the things that we can do to respond to the risk that we have identified, and also to optimize and maximize the opportunities that exist, and how we're going to reduce our threat, or how it is that we are going to address it. So it's not identifying and managing risk is not all about overwhelming ourselves of the things that could go wrong, but also putting ourselves in a position that we are able to identify strategies, ways of managing our risk so that we could minimize the things that we are up against and make the best of the opportunities that is presented. So for risk responses, there are certain things that could be done. You could avoid or eliminate the risk altogether. So let's take the example of the risk, the flood. So we know that in the rainy season, there are certain areas like Bexon that is prone to flooding. You go to build your house, you're avoiding that risk altogether, you don't build your house in Bexon. Okay? Then you have your mitigation strategy, how you're going to reduce the impact. So for instance, heavy rain is coming in, you have some gap under your door, water could come in, so you mitigate the effect of water coming into your house and flooding inside your house. So you put, how do you call it, sandbag across from your door to mitigate that impact. Transfer, it means transferring your risk, means you make another party responsible. The most likely example to use in our home example is that we get home insurance for our home. So we transfer that risk to somebody else. Now, bear in mind, transferring the risk to a third party does not eliminate the risk. All it's saying is another party is going to be responsible for that risk. So that is transfer. Or you accept and you can say that there's nothing I can do. It's going to happen. It is going to happen. Right? So these are some of the strategies to address the threats, the things that are likely to impact us negatively in terms of achieving our goals, taking actions to achieve our goals. In terms of opportunities, so we're looking at what are the things that we can do to maximize and make the best of our opportunities. It means that we can exploit it, okay? So exploiting could be in terms of the home example, if we're getting group insurance, we're getting a lower. So it means that you can probably not just cover the house, but you can get the coverage for your appliances and so on. Enhance, you increase the positive impact. So you probably could look at ways that you can have better impact with your opportunities. Share, you could look at your friends and your neighbor, your friends, your neighbors to bring in and share in your opportunities. And in your the final option is to accept. Okay, so Betty, anything you want to add on this slide?
Yes, Pearl. First of all, let's thank Marina. That flood example you did, I find, was a really good example, and it was interesting that Marina from the chat had said, let's consider flood. Even an example of, say, for instance, business people. When people go into business, entrepreneurs, we tend to say they are risk takers. But in truth and in fact, if you look at it, people go into business because there's an opportunity they're trying to capitalize on. And so let's see entrepreneurs and business people as opportunity exploiters versus the negative term of risk takers. They're already opportunity exploiters. Another point to be made is this is a very important slide in that we have a tendency, whenever we talk risk, we tend to use the word mitigate, as if that is the only strategy that applies to risk, when you have shown that there are so many different strategies. And so for those of us who are here, and when you leave the webinar, what we would like is for you to start using the term strategies to address risk versus just saying mitigate the risk. Because now you know mitigation is just one strategy. I think that was an important point to be made, Pearl.
Definitely, Betty, because it limits the kind of actions that you can take to address your risk.
That's right. Okay. If you just think in mitigation.
Exactly.
But right. You must start thinking strategy is the word you use. How do I strategize in relation to this risk? Very important.
Definitely. Great. Now, what we did to drive home the point of managing risk. So we use as a practical example, hosting this webinar, and we identified various risks, the impact. We did an assessment of it, the prioritization, what strategies we use, and the responsibility. So it gives a framework in terms of how best we can evaluate our risk. So one of the risks we identified was low registration and the impact of that. So if we have low registration, the impact would be poor attendance. Okay, so we did the assessment. So this is what is called a qualitative assessment, right? So you more or less use your judgment to gauge based on the different circumstances. So we say the impact of that is medium, the probability of it is low, and we will have a discussion in terms of how we prioritize the risk. The strategies that we used was the one, we advertise the value of the session to our target group. We ensure the sessions are short and they're at the time that is convenient to our target group. So any other strategies we could have used? Any other strategies?
And maybe I should also say that what actually happened was our registration was pretty high. We had 55 persons registered. And right now our attendance is about 19.
Okay.
Yes, but from data trend with webinars, generally you expect about 40 to 60% of registrants to attend. And that has been the trend with webinars.
Okay. Okay. So any of any strategies we could have had to address the risk of low registration?
Yes, so Annette said that we could allow members to invite guests, right?
Okay. Yes, that's a good strategy. Okay, so let's look at another risk, which is internet connectivity issues, and the impact, negative impact in terms of the participants' experience, given the history of internet service in the part of the world. We say the likelihood of that, the impact would be high, the probability is medium. So to address that, we had a number of strategies. Co-host privileges are given, backup presenters with the presentations if we have any internet issues. Any other strategies that we could have used? Okay, so we can look at the last risk.
Pearl, just before we
Yes.
go on, I think we need to stress on the importance of responsibility and assigning responsibility for managing the risk. Otherwise, it's not being done. So, and we have somebody saying something in the chat as well. So let's also mention the responsibility aspect as we look at this table.
Yes, so in terms of responsibility, it is important to have one person assigned to the risk. So the person would be responsible to see if the strategy that we have agreed upon is addressing the risk, and when we apply the strategy, is there any other emerging risk from the strategy? So this person is monitoring how the strategy is working. Is it effective or not? Okay, so you must have somebody like a risk owner, more or less, to be able to look at that risk. So it's not just about identifying the risk and doing the assessment, but we need to be able to be vigilant and proactive to make sure that what we are doing is working. If it's not working, that we take corrective action.
And Pearl,
Okay.
I have a very good example of this. Is again my second son Zabi. He sleeps with a torchlight in case they take electricity. And one day he came to me and he says, "Mommy, there's a smell in my room. I don't know what it is." And when I went in, there was an odor. And it turned out the batteries in his torchlight had started leaking. And so it's so important that when you put the strategy in place, you need to monitor the strategy so the strategy is effective when it is needed. Very important point there. Yes.
Yes. So, Randy, any strategy suggested in the chat?
So Antoinette and Annette said to reduce use of bandwidth by staying off cameras.
Yes, that's a very effective strategy.
Yes, very nice.
Yes. And the last risk that we identified, that given that risk management is getting more attention because of the impact of climate change, security, safety, and so on, so that you have higher interest in webinars addressing risk. Okay, so we see the impact is high, probability medium. And so we had looked at the strategies, attend the webinar and similar sessions, and knowing about the standards for risk management. So in the 3 risks, we have to look at prioritizing the risk. Because why we prioritize? Yes, Betty?
Sorry, the stress that this last one is an opportunity. So whereas the other 2 were threats, this last one is an opportunity of risk management is gaining popularity because of climate change, safety, security, and de-risking. So if we can stress that this is an opportunity example.
Yes. So we had 2 risks and an opportunity. Okay. So in this, what we have identified is to prioritize. And why we are prioritizing the risk, our priority, because we may not have the resources to deal with all the risks that we have identified. So where it is that it is good to be proactive in identifying as many risks as possible, so that it helps you in terms of your preparedness and so on. You may not have the resources to deal with all the risks. that you have identified. So it is good that you would prioritize the risk to see which one that you give focused attention to. So in looking at the 3 risks, which one would you prioritize as 1, which one would you prioritize as 2, and which one would you prioritize as 3? So Betty, perhaps you could start. Which one would you prioritize as 1?
If we're looking at the threats, first, then I would prioritize internet connectivity issues because there's a high impact and a medium probability. So if we're looking at the 2 threats, of the 2 threats, I would prioritize internet connectivity as 1.
Okay. Anybody else? Randy, any suggestions in the chat?
So one just came in by Shondell. She said, install generators for home in the event of a storm or UPS to keep cameras running if there are no generators. That's what we have in the chat.
Okay, so in terms of the priority.
Yeah. Roger said that he would prioritize internet connectivity issues over registration. All right.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All right. Jermaine said that he's driving, so he can't text right now. But I guess he's listening to our presentation.
Okay, Jermaine, reduce your risk on the road.
And Pearl, let's talk about that opportunity. You know, I keep telling people risk management is becoming the next big thing because again, it is that first thing you must do. Whenever you're trying to achieve something, your first step should be what could go wrong and what could go right. That has to be your starting point if you're about being effective and efficient. So again, the whole idea of people being present, and notice under responsibility, we didn't just have the group, but we had the potential registrants, because it was up to the registrants to recognize the value of this webinar. And we saw that in the number of this was the largest registration numbers we had. It's pity it didn't come down to attendance numbers, but registration number 55 said that there were a number of people out there who recognize the value of this body of knowledge and wanted to know more about it.
Definitely. But what I want to add to the conversation at this point is when it is good to have the what if mindset for the risk, but in practice, what you find that if, for instance, you are planning an event and you are looking at what if and trying to identify what could go wrong, there is a tendency for people to say, oh, don't be so negative. Things will happen. Keep a positive outlook. But having this proactive approach to it, it doesn't mean that you're negative, you're calling things upon you. It means that you are having that approach, that you are anticipating things and preparing.
Yes. Good point.
You understand?
Good point. Good point.
Yes.
And you want people like that in your group. They tend to call them the negative people, or, you know, they always have terms for these people, but you want people like that in your group. These people who have you thinking outside of the box to address possible risk.
Yes. So there is value in terms of looking at what could go wrong. So you are in a state of preparedness. Okay. So this is a good framework. So when you're looking at that, you can take from the webinar into your practice. So you can identify your risk, look at the impact, what impact it will have, the impact level, the probability, prioritizing your risk, looking at strategy, actions that you can take to address the risk you have identified, and identifying your risk owner or somebody who has responsibility for the risk. Okay. So we have looked at in some regard monitor and controlling the risk, which is like we are looking at whether the responses, the strategies that we have put in place, whether they are working as we expected and intended, and to take corrective action, right? And to ensure that we are always monitoring. And we see in our example, to have the risk owner is one of the the activities that we can use, or an option, sorry, that we can use in terms of monitoring our risk. So this picture, let's look at this picture. And if we could relate risk to a fire. So you could see fire has good qualities about it. You can cook, you can have, fire can heal, and so on. But two, if fire is allowed to go out of control, it has devastating impact. I don't know if you followed, was it earlier this year, what happened in Hawaii? A community in Hawaii, fire went out of control. But you can see, if you are able to take control, take action, in a timely manner to control the fire, then you can minimize the impact. Okay, so this is more or less to summarize. I think this photo summarize what we have been talking about in terms of risk, that there are positive risks, there are negative risks, but what is important is the action that we take, the timeliness of the action in addressing the risk. Anything you want to add, Betty, to this display?
No, I think you said it well, the preparedness. I mean, this is what this is about. People who fail to prepare to fail, you know? It's about preparedness.
Definitely. Okay, so there are some guidelines in terms of managing risk, and that is, you can refer to the ISO 31000 of 2018 to look at the broad principles with looking at risk. And at the core of risk and risk management is creating value and enhancing protection. And there are some key principles in terms, the key principles for that is supposed to be integrated, is not a silo or fragmented approach, is integrated, because risk can affect so many different components and facets of the home, your office, your business, and so on. It is structured, and you could see structured in that we have shown you a simple tool like the SWOT analysis to have a structured approach to addressing your risk. It is very comprehensive, so it's not a simplistic activity. You can customize it based on the situation, whether it's home-based, personal, your own personal, your business, your project. It is inclusive, meaning that you can bring in different parties, different stakeholders in identifying in the identification of your risk. It is a dynamic, not a static process that you have identified the risk and leave it alone. It's dynamic, it's evolving. It's based on your best available information, because we know when you're dealing with risk, there's this uncertainty aspect of it. That means that you do not have absolute information. There's consideration for human and cultural factors, because in terms of cultural factors and human factors, there will be different ways of dealing with risk. For instance, in the Caribbean, I think we tend to be very risk averse. So in managing your risk, you take these cultural factors into consideration, and then there is continuous improvement, again, from the environment, that it is not static. You're also looking at what works, what needs to be improved, and so on. So this gives you a very broad set of principles to be able to guide your management of risk. Anything you want to add, Betty?
I think you said it all. I mean, I really love this diagram. I like the core of it that talks about why are you doing this? This is about creating value, and this is about ensuring protection. I love that. I love that word inclusiveness and dynamic. Remember, it is an ongoing process. So one of the things you must be doing always is updating your risk register. That is very important, because the environment is changing. And once the environment is changing, that means other risks are being introduced. I like the inclusiveness, and that's why we say to people, when you are doing your risk, addressing your risk, bring in as many people as you can, forget their perspective as to all the things that can go wrong and all the things that can go right. Another one is customized. that a risk register for one organization, you can use it as a guide, but you don't replicate it because your situation is different. So each register is customized to your particular organization, to your particular situation. You know, Pearl, there's another thing I like about risk, and I don't know, is the whole idea, a source of risk. A good source of risk is issues. So for instance, you're about to start something, don't start from scratch. Find out from somebody else who has done it, what were their issues? So their issues were things they were reactive about, but now you have an opportunity to be proactive. So you would lose now their issues and put their issues down as risk for your particular activity or project, whatever you're doing. So understanding that connection between past issues and preparing your risk register, I think, is also very important.
Yes, and to add to that, Betty, I think also in looking at the risk and also asking about what were the best practices, what are the things that worked?
Yes, very important. You're so right, Pearl. And
Yeah.
too many times we tend to think that lessons learned are only from mistakes, but lessons learned are also from the successes. So what were you're so right about that. You can get those lessons learned from successes as well as from issues or things that might have gone wrong. Well said, well said.
Yes. Right, so that gives you, in terms of broadly, the things that you could use to really go into your risk and how you can approach your risk management. Okay,
and
so
Pearl, just
yes.
maybe you have to say something about this too. With regard to risk management, some of the people might be familiar with PMP, the project management professional. Both Pearl and myself are project management professionals, but PMI also does a risk management professional certification. So for persons who are interested, and we're telling you this is becoming the next big thing, because this is applicable to anything that you're doing, that you might want to look into actually getting the credential as a risk professional manager, which PMI offers. So I thought I would drop that in there, Pearl.
Yes, definitely, because it is good to acquire the skill and make yourself market ready. Yes. So that's an opportunity right there. Okay, so now we will have the question and answer session. That's your opportunity to ask questions and make interventions. So I think, Betty, we can unmute now.
Yes, let me do this. Let me make sure people can now talk to us. And so unmute themselves. So people should be able to unmute themselves.
I would just like to say to the participants as they are thinking about the questions, I want to remind you that this exercise is about creating value for you as professionals, as people who manage your homes. And so as you do your questions, please don't just focus. Remember, we started this exercise with risk in the home. We want you to consider risk beyond a project, because I know that's largely how we think of it. And think of your own life and the day-to-day risks and how do you apply this in everyday living, because I think sometimes we forget that in order to be effective professionals, we have our own lives to manage. We need to be comfortable and safe as an individual before we can get out there and be a professional or leader or anything else. So remember, as you ask your question, don't let it just be about how I do it at work, how I do it for myself, how I do it at home. We'll try to answer that as best as we can.
Yeah, you know, Jacqueline, I remember when I made the decision to take early retirement, one of the first things I did was a SWOT analysis. And I have recommended it for anybody who's about to make a career move change. First start off with a SWOT analysis. And I remember when I did that SWOT analysis, and this is, I mean, I went into quality management. And when I did that SWOT analysis, there were just so many opportunities associated with quality management that my opportunities list was much longer than my threat list. And my strengths list was much longer than my weaknesses list. And I said to them, and at that point I made the decision, I'm going to do it. I am going to retire and start on my own. So making a career move, this is the applicability of this thing for anything you're about to do. Start off with a SWOT analysis, then go in and prepare the risk register. And it gives you a bit of confidence. You are more reassured. And like Pearl says, we tend to think that you're thinking negative, but there's nothing wrong with thinking negative, provided you're coming up with strategies to address the negative. And that's what it's about, the strategy. And I keep saying, it is one thing to identify, a lot of us, we stop at that point. We identify the risk and we go further. But the more important thing is the strategies. That is going to help you to address the threats and capitalize on the opportunities.
Definitely.
So
Definitely.
yeah, so in the chat we have I think it's Velika. She's asking how would one do that certification, the risk certification. I think that's pertaining to what you said, Betty, about the PMI.
Yeah, well, you have to go onto the PMI website. And when you go onto the PMI website, all their certifications or the credentials they offer is there. And most of us are familiar with CAPM and PMP, right? But there are a number of other certifications. So once you go onto the PMI website will give you all the information you require with regard to a risk management professional. As far as I know, there is only one person in St. Lucia who has actually done that certification pool. I don't know if you know the person, but how I knew was when you go onto the PMI website gives you a list. They keep a list of their certifications. So they tell you who is certified and when the person got certified. And when I did that, I noticed there was one person who was coming from St. Lucia who had achieved the risk management professional certification. So just go onto the PMI website and all that information is there.
Yeah, and I think Jessica was trying to unmute. I don't know if she has the capabilities right now to do that.
I'm able to now.
Oh, beautiful,
Right, okay.
Beautiful. So again, people can talk to us. At this point, everybody should be able to unmute themselves. So unmute yourself to pose your question. You're no longer muted. So let's make sure that's happening too.
Just raise your hand and we'll get you.
Yes, and raise your hand and we'll get you. That's right. That's another option, to raise your hand. As someone people talk to us, I mean, I cannot stress the value of this body of knowledge. The beautiful thing now is ISO has a standard, and we have Devendra in the room, and Devendra is very much, he works closely with ISO and ISO technical committees. So I don't know if Devendra wants to say something to us with regard to ISO 31000. Dev, do you want to talk to us at all? And can you?
Hi, yes, Betty, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good. So 31,000 lays out the principles, and it goes into some of the details if you want to set up a full risk management system within an organization. And as with many of the ISO standards, it does not limit it to for-profit businesses. If you are government, if you're NGO, charity, non-profit, volunteer, all of those can benefit from following the principles in ISO 31000. And of course, a lot of the core of it has been covered in this webinar. So I think all of the participants have gotten a very good introduction to what they will find in 31000. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Devendra. I'm noticing also Andre Charles is in the room. Now, Andre Charles is coming from the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards. So, Andre Charles, we're giving you an opportunity there to plug in how they can get it at a reduced price, that standard at a reduced price, if they come through the Bureau of Standards. Andre Charles, do you want to do that and capitalize on this opportunity?
Hi, good night, Betty. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks for that plug, Betty. Much appreciated. So yes, indeed. These are part of the standards that have been adopted, and we, as Betty just mentioned, we have these at a reduced price. So if you had to go directly to ISO for the standard, you will be paying a much higher price. Once we nationally adopt a standard, it's at a far reduced price compared to the original cost. So again, thanks for that, Betty. Unfortunately, I'm just coming into this meeting. My apologies for that. But I assume even just listening to the Vindra, it was very informative, and it was fully mentioned describing the 31,000 risk management standard.
Yes, thank you so much, Andrew. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Any other
Thanks.
questions? Any other comments? Jacqueline, all yours.
I think for me, what I as you know, but my whole orientation is more people than project, and so for me, it's applying this as we go through life and make those right decisions like you're talking about. And again, we very often don't do that SWOT that you talked about, and we don't go beyond determining that this is a risk, or our response to it is, you know what, let me not do this, it will not work, without ever thinking of another strategy that we can use to approach this. So I really would like people to internalize that even as we are making day-to-day decisions, getting married, having sex, whatever it is we're thinking about, that we can apply these tools and be more effective in our decision making.
Now, you know, Jacqueline, you once you mentioned sex, I had to say something there, right? Now, the whole idea, even
oh
when
God,
you
I forgot I should not have opened that door.
Now, Leah Yad wants to say something, and Leah is a special woman, and we have to give Leah time. So Leah, to give Leah time. Leah, talk to us. Leah, talk to us. Unmute yourself and talk to us.
Hi, good night, everybody.
Good night.
I just have a simple question. I have nothing much to say right now. You spoke about doing the risk management course, but do you need to do the project management course first, or you could just do that course?
No, you don't. You again go onto the PMI website. The only thing is I can tell you, whereas there are agencies here who prepare you for PMP, I am not aware, except I think maybe Lightspark. Well, am I right? I think I've seen Lightspark advertise it. I don't know if they are working the numbers.
Gamma is doing PMP.
But Gamma is doing PMP, but is Lightspark doing risk management professional preparation?
Yeah.
Oh, so then you can check with Lightspark. I think they are preparing people for that exam. But no, you do not have to do PMP to do the RMP. So there are a number of credentials, and you just choose the one you want to do and you prepare accordingly.
So if you have already done events management, would that be a plus?
Oh,
because
yes,
when you're doing events, when you're doing an event, you have to run all the risks.
Yes. The thing is, once you have done any management system would be a risk-based system. So with any management system, you would have been exposed to risk management already. Yes, it definitely would help. Yes. Okay, Leah. Very good. Thank you for that, Leah. And we have Andre. Andre, your hand is up.
Yes. Just one thing to mention. I heard not the previous one, but the one before speaker noted looking at risk, and I'm sure you all have presented it, that risk could be both positive and negative, and it really just looks at uncertainty. Yes. And uncertainty with your objectives. So that's something to always bear in mind.
Oh yes, and so it's worth reinforcing that. We did mention that, but again, to stress that, and a good example we gave is for business people. Business people are really opportunity exploiters. We tend to make it negative and say they're risk takers, and that sounds negative, you know what I mean? But in truth and in fact, there is a gap in the market they're trying to fill. So they're opportunity exploiters. Go ahead, Leah. Leah, I'm noticing your hand is up.
Oh, I thought I lowered my hand. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Jacqueline, all yours.
So everybody appreciate it.
Any questions in the group? No questions there in the chat either. Okay, can we move on to the next slide, please?
Okay, and thank you, Jacqueline. And so this is where again Jacqueline explained about the GPM, the Good Practice Movement, and we are about promoting a culture of continuous improvement. We are trying as much as possible to be an inclusive organization. We welcome everybody to come in. And this is the network of the movement. There is a core group. I am one member of the core group. There are other members of the core group. There's information we can send to you about the Good Practice Movement. So you can just send us an email and we would respond with that. Please note that we don't have a secretariat, and so sometimes we take a while to respond to the email. Take note of that. So there is a core group, and this core group started meeting about maybe 3 years ago, and now we are going into the different subgroups. So the active group right now is the forum group, and so we are members of the forum group. And so we are inviting you to come into the forum, join us on this journey where we empower our people to get the results they want. That's what it's about, empowering our people to get the results they want. This is what this is about, okay? And so this is a call. So Pearl, if the next slide, I think, is the call to join. If Pearl shows us the next slide. And so, yeah, so the call to join the forum group. This is the active group at this point, and we're inviting people to join. Once you're interested, you can let us know now, but also you can send us an email via WhatsApp. And I'm noticing Leah's hand is up. Leah, talk to us.
Yes, Miss. There is something that I encountered this week. While I'm planning an event, and there are certain places, business places, that you need to get documents from. But I called a certain business place which I needed to find out every document that I required to bring to them and exactly what needs to be done. They only gave me one set of information that is only what pertains to them. When I asked, can you direct me as to every step I should take? Because they have all that information there.
Yes.
But when I went to another institution where I had to collect other documents, they told me they were the starting point, not the other institution. So they were the starting point where I had to start from them, go to all other institutions, and go to the first place that I called and come back to them. So if you don't ask, if the people are not fully educated or give you the information that you require at the places, you run the risk of missing out on certain things that you have to do. And your event could have a setback because you personally, maybe if it's the first time you're doing it, it's your lack of knowledge. And then you're asking the persons that you think that should be able to give you the information and direct you, and they don't. So these are the things that even set back people. And our event was not even able to come up because we were running a risk of the police shutting us down without one particular document. So I still believe that we need direction.
Yes, and what I would suggest, Lee, and that's and this is what you're saying there is not a one-time occurrence. That happens a number of places and a number of times. And what I say to people, whenever you are starting something for the first time, the first thing to do is talk to people who have done it before. That is my suggestion for that. Whenever you're doing something for the first time, talk to people who have done it before. They're likely to give you a whole lot more information than those institutions or agencies you're depending on. So go to those agencies armed with information already. That is my suggestion in being proactive in that situation.
But you know, some people can be devious and hold back on you. So
yeah, but
anyway, it's a learning process.
Yes, but Leah, and that's where you use triangulation. So you get information from different sources.
Yeah.
Never depend on just one source. Talk to different people, and then you see what is the commonality. What is everybody?
You know, I could talk already. You know that.
Yes, I know that, Leah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing up. That's a really good example that happens just too frequently. And I'm saying is if we are proactive, then one of the proactive things you do is to talk to as many people as possible who have been involved in that kind of event or that kind of situation, and they can provide you some information as well. Yes, Andre, talk to us.
Yeah, just to that question, I think also, I don't know of CEDU ever doing that. However, they are well, they're SBDCS right now, but they do cater to small businesses, and I'm sure you could plug it or you could swing it in that regard as you doing promotion and you have a promotion business, you register with CEDU. What are your requirements? So it will almost force the hand to help you research and get information, because they would also have the network to get that information probably easier than you. So I would agree with Betty and say speak to persons before who've done it
Yes.
before, but also
Yes.
try to utilize the government departments to actually
Yes.
assist in that regard.
Yeah, government departments that are focused on small enterprises and micro
Right,
enterprises.
and business
Yes,
development.
I would agree.
Right.
And business development. Yes, I agree with that too. I agree with that too. Yes, but the whole thing is do your research first. You know, do your research. And research is through agencies, through the internet. Research is talking to people. I think we are missing out on that one, talking to people who have gone through it. These people have lessons learned. They have issues, and that's the value of talking to people who have gone through it. They have the lessons learned from the successes and the lessons learned from the failures. You don't want to be repeating those errors. Thank you so much, Andre. Okay, so the call to the forum group, like we said, think about it. And if you're interested, we can send you information on the group to help you make up your mind. But again, we're putting out this call. We're putting out this call to join the GPM forum group. Jacqueline, I think it's back to you.
Next slide, please.
Sorry, I missed that. Yes, Jacqueline. Yes.
Okay. As we said, this particular webinar was the third in our series. The other two, the PDCA cycle and the results logic chain, are available on our Facebook group page, and we will show you the URL for that a little bit further on. We do plan to do two more in this series. The SMART objectives will come up in a few months. We haven't quite confirmed the date as yet, and then we will do an action plan webinar a little further on. What we hope that you understand from this is that we are a group that is here to provide information, but also to learn from you. And so as a part of this process, when you get to our Facebook page and you see these webinars, you can comment. We will still look at it there. Like Becky said, we don't have a secretariat, but we are listening. We will check in. We will see, you know, what people are doing out there. I think one of the things that Leah raised when she said, you know, people can just be devious and withhold information. I think if you want to be an effective service provider, if you want success, and Betty's favorite expression, if you want repeat business, being devious is not the way to go. And so I apply whenever I ask for information and I get what I don't think is the right information, I apply something I now call my MRI, the most responsible interpretation. So when somebody says something to me, I go through my head trying to determine what is the very best thing that they are possibly saying to me using this language. And when I can figure that out, that informs my next question. So what I try to do is change. If it's coming at me and it's kind of like harsh and negative, I'm short-tempered. Using MRI, I say to myself, okay, get your feelings out of the way. What is this person really trying to say to you? And that's how you become a little more effective in understanding, in the listening, and in sharing and getting the information that you need. Please check our webinars. Please go through them, put our comments and any suggestions, and we are open to you saying, what else? What other topics would you like to hear us bring to you in a webinar series? Next slide, please. This is the guidelines that we mentioned earlier. So this document is available, and I think Andre said it's available from his department. Andre, could you put up in the chat so people can see where you are, how they get it, the cost, that sort of information? Just write something in the chat so people can follow.
Okay, what I'll do is
Go ahead.
Go ahead,
Uh-huh.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Andre.
What I'll do is I'll put up the bureau's website, and on the bureau's
Excellent.
website you could do a search and you would see the online store, and you could purchase via the online store. So I'll put it up through there. I'll
Wonderful.
also put in the contact number for the bureau. So for any further information, feel free to contact us.
Excellent. That's what we're here for, sharing information.
Jacqueline, a
Thank you very
special
much.
thank you to Devindra Shatagun, who is coming in from Trinidad, and for sharing with us information with regard to that standard as well. Thank you so much, Devindra. It's about
Absolutely,
sharing.
Devendra, if there's any website or anything that you want to share with us, so that people can use as a resource as they continue to look at risk, please also feel free to put that in the chat, so people can pick up that information. Next slide, please. And ladies and gentlemen, this is where you will find our information. To contact us, should you want to become a member of the group in any way, there's an email address there to reach the Good Practice Movement. And the Good Practice Movement is the name of the Facebook group where you can pick up the webinars. This one will be posted there as well. Next slide, please. We are now open to any comments, any feedback, any thoughts that you might have about this webinar or any thoughts for the future. Open the floor. I think mics are still open.
Yes, as far as I know, they're still open. So just turn on your mic and talk to us. We'd like to hear from you.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I must say I don't really have any questions, but I'd just like to commend everybody who put this session together. It was very informative. It's not new, but it was refreshing to hear that information. You know, it just put some things into perspective for me. And I must say, hats off to you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Samantha.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Samantha. We'll be working you on the next one, not to worry.
I didn't quite get that. What did you say?
I said, we will be working you on the next one. Don't think you're getting away that easily.
Okay, then. Have a good evening. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Any other thoughts? Anybody else? Thanks, Devendra. Thanks for that website. Folks, open up the website, bookmark them on your computers so that you have it for follow-up. Make a note someplace, copy and paste it.
I cannot stress, risk management is becoming the next big thing.
And it is extremely valuable.
Yes.
Extremely valuable in everything you're doing. When
That's
you're doing
right.
your strategic plans, when you're planning your next big engagement, your next event, Leah,
Yes.
anything of that nature. Extreme. Hurricane season is coming.
Yes.
How do you plan for that? What
That's
strategies
right.
are you putting in place?
That's
Who
right.
needs to dig a new drain to ensure flooding, water doesn't get into the house? Who needs to cut the tree? All there. You don't seem to be getting any feedback. I don't see anything in the chat. Next slide, please.
Could we ask people before you leave the room at least to maybe write something in the chat? We need some encouragement, people. We're doing this. We think it's valuable. We need to hear from you that is valuable as well. So please, before you leave, if you could just write something in the chat, we would appreciate that.
We are absolutely grateful for your presence. As we said at the beginning, this was about exchanging knowledge. So we don't have all the knowledge or we don't know everything. And so hearing from you is really quite helpful to us to say, well, okay, do we need to do another risk webinar with them to expand maybe on this register, to hone in on any specific risk? Is there anything we need to build around this? Anything that you can, somebody says, good work, I'm interested in joining. Could we get back to the page, Betty, with the email address? So they
Okay,
can see it?
Pearl is the one moving this. Pearl, we'll be looking for the one with the email address.
There we go. So,
yeah.
Marina, there is the email address. Please send us an email.
And we will send you the
Yeah.
information about the group.
Absolutely. Leah, there's the email. Use that as well. Thank you all so very much for joining us this
So
evening.
Jacqueline,
As the group like to.
So Jacqueline, we have, how many persons we have saying they're interested in joining the group?
So far, I've seen 2.
And they are?
Leah and
Marina.
And Marina, yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, guys. Looking forward to you coming in.
Leah is saying she's definitely going to try her best to do the risk management course. Wonderful.
There you go. Beautiful. Just check that PMI website.
Mandy, we hope that you found some value in it and that you'll consider joining us. I'm sure every one of you is a resource in some area as we develop more webinars and try to get people, to be more effective and efficient, just functioning every day in their work and in their personal life.
I think Jeremiah had his hand up.
Jeremiah, could you talk to us?
I was just trying to put a thumbs up, so I indicating that I wanted to join the group. But
oh, great, great.
I
Jeremiah, we would welcome you. Know we have Randy's our only man in the group.
I was just about to say Randy's quite lonely, Jeremiah. Please join him.
So please just send us an email through that email address, and then we will send the information you need. Okay, very important. Thank you so much, Jeremiah. We really appreciate that. And we're sure Randy's very happy too.
Yes, I am.
Ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that we think is a good practice is respecting people's time. We do apologize for the slightly late start. We hope, however, it didn't inconvenience anyone. We are now 3 minutes before 8 o'clock. We captured all our information within our allotted time, and we are grateful for your participation. Thank you and good night.
Good night, everybody. Good night. Good night. And the forum group, we can do our postmortem at the next meeting. And so let's call it a night. Yes. Pearl,
Good night.
Pearl, any last minute words from you, Pearl?
I just want to thank everybody for their participation and their input, and thank the team for putting the this session together.
Thank you, team. Thank you, team. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Bye bye.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.